I am still not able to start my video.
Give me one moment here. Well, let me go ahead and while we figure that out, I'm gonna welcome everybody here. Good evening. Thank you everybody for joining us for the first webinar in the Climate Solutions Week series. Today's webinar is about Missouri River flood control. My name is Wanda Colo. I'm the Director of Sustainable Operations and Construction Management here at St. Louis Zoo, and also a member of the St. Louis Zoo's Green Team and Climate Change Task Force. And I'll be your host and moderator tonight. So before I introduce tonight's climate champion, I have a few housekeeping items to share. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared at stlzoo.org/climate change. We're unable to see or hear you, but you are more than welcome to use the questions function in the Q&A. And due to the length of this webinar, questions will be questions that we don't get to will be answered to the best of our speakers' ability at the Sunday Climate Solutions Day panel with the rest of our panelists that'll be speaking then. And finally, please remember to be respectful and courteous to our presenter and each other. Please keep your questions to our presenter. Please keep your questions relevant to the presented topic. If someone is unable to follow those protocols, their questions or comments will be removed, and they themselves may be removed entirely from the webinar. Now I'd like to introduce you to our wonderful speaker tonight, and I am having, let me just make sure that we can actually see our presenter here. So give me just a moment as I figure this out. Let's see here. Whoop. Okay, let's see. Sorry about this. A little bit of, okay, let's see. All right, let's see if this works. Can you turn on your?
Yeah, there I am.
There you are. Wonderful.
Hey, nice.
Thank you. And sorry, thanks for bearing with me on that. So let me do a quick introduction of Jim Karpowicz. He is with the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. And for the past 30 years, Jim has combined his passion for wildlife, wild places, and environmental issues with high quality video production. Transforming complex scientific concepts into compelling stories has become his hallmark, and the numerous awards and honors his work has received speak to the popularity of his programs with the general public. For over 20 years, Jim was a lead producer for the Missouri Department of Conservation's Missouri Outdoors program. With over 100 story segments in the can, Jim evolved into long-form production not only for the Missouri Department of Conservation, but other state and federal resource agencies as well. Jim has produced dozens of award-winning documentary films concerning a wide range of natural history and environmental issues. And in 2001, Jim stepped from behind the camera to found Missouri River Relief, a hands-on, on the river advocacy group devoted to physically cleaning up the wide Missouri. Thousands of volunteers have picked up hundreds of tons of trash on the lower Missouri as a result of this organization. And Jim's river adjacent Boone County property has served as the organization's boatyard and equipment headquarters for nearly 20 years. So with that, I will turn it over to Jim to tell us more.
Thank you, Wanda, for that fabulous introduction. I remember writing it a couple of years ago. It's kind of embarrassing now, but I do have a lot of experience with Missouri River issues. 20 years ago, I, along with some other people, founded Missouri River Relief, which is a cleanup organization. And just last Tuesday, we celebrated our 20th anniversary, and it was awesome. There's lots of people there. It was fabulous. since my work with River Relief was, it was kind of time to let somebody else take a turn. I continue to do my video production efforts, but I've also taken on a job as river advocate with the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. And the Missouri River really, really needs a river advocate. I'm sorry, I haven't really prepared a super organized PowerPoint or anything, but I feel fairly confident about talking about Missouri River issues as they stand now on the ground. So just a little background for people that don't know, the Missouri used to be the wildest river on the continent. Snags and sandbars, and it would come up and down hard, 30 or 40 feet. So in the early 1900s, we started to, basically it started with pulling snags out of the river, trying to stabilize the banks. And eventually there was this Pick-Sloan Act that the federal government introduced to build 6 main stem dams on the Missouri River to prevent the flooding. And that work went on through the 1940s. I think the final dams were finished in the 1950s. And while that probably was absolutely devastating for the river ecosystem, it did prevent some serious flooding that we were experiencing. The river was a lot more stable, the lower river. After the completion of the dams, the Corps of Engineers started with the Bank Stabilization and Navigation Project, which was basically narrowing the river, kind of encasing it in rock riprap, channeling it with wing dikes and the like. The object was to make the river self-scouring, to make it faster and narrower, so that it didn't wind between the hills on both sides. It was sort of locked into place. What that did is it did create a navigation channel. It did do what it was supposed to do. It also destroyed thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres of wildlife habitat in the process. It also created a lot of agricultural land, because behind these levees, land accrued. And that land was always, and always had been, due to Missouri law, or actually federal law, went to the adjoining landowner. So a lot of the people that owned land down in the river bottoms had a real benefit, because land was created by the Missouri Bank Stabilization Navigation Project, creating these wonderful bottomland fields that they could farm. So that's how things were. And so we've been moving along in that regard for quite a while. At a certain point, somebody came up with the idea that, we kind of need to do something concerning all of the acres of wildlife habitat that were destroyed. And they, the Corps, in conjunction with the Fish and Wildlife, eventually developed the Missouri River Restoration Program. Even though they estimate something like 540,000 acres of wildlife habitat were destroyed, the Corps, with the Fish and Wildlife, and it was congressionally authorized that they would restore 160,000 acres of wetlands and shallow water habitat to help bring back wildlife. So that's kind of brings us to where we are today. The Corps, even though they were tasked with restoring 160,000 acres, they restored 60,000 acres and then they just stopped. The reason they stopped was a lawsuit filed by a lot of Missouri corn growers. It was called the Ideker suit. It concerned the flood of 2011, and basically through a series of judgments, which are the Corps is actually appealing right now, but the Corps lost, and the judge in the case said that the Corps was illegally taking farmers' land because they were letting it flood. Now, if you know anything about flooding, that's not exactly what happened, but that's the way the court saw it. That's being appealed. So that's kind of the state of play. I think that the reason that I mentioned that the Missouri River really needed an advocate is because there is no advocate. On the Mississippi, there's lots of different groups working to make the Mississippi a better place. The Missouri is sort of in this stasis, and it's there because of the Corps' management of the river. which is kind of weird. I mean, it basically does not allow for any natural processes. It's basically a rock ditch. And they're sort of, even though they have plans to change some of that, they don't do it because they're afraid of these lawsuits. So we have, we've had high water years here for at least the past 7 years, this year being the exception. This is the first year that we can actually see wing dikes and sandbars on the river. But here's my insights on what's going on the ground now. And I think it's very interesting because even though there has been this total gridlock between environmental groups and the Corps of Engineers and ag groups, and everybody's blaming everybody for the state of play on the Missouri River. The ag groups are blaming the endangered species enthusiasts, and everybody blames the Corps. But what's happening today is interesting because I think that dynamic is changing. When I, as a video producer, actually made a film for the corn growers in 2011 concerning that flood. And everybody on the ground I was talking to was blaming the Corps of Engineers for their mismanagement of releasing water from the Gavins Point Dam. And that may have been very true because it was dry summer in the lower river and the river just kept coming up. So can't really speak to that. But today, as opposed to 2011, farmers are starting to look at being resilient to extreme weather events. They won't say the word climate change. They'll say being resilient to weather events. But they're changing the way they do business on the river, and I think in a very good way. I was involved in the governor had this flood recovery task force that we called the FWOG because it had, you know, a bunch of acronyms and stuff. Excuse me. And I lost you, Wanda. You're not there anymore, but I'll keep talking. There you go. So the FROG did not have any environmental groups on it. It had ag interest. It had highway department interest, people involved in infrastructure. But it also had this group, the Atchison County Levee District. And they presented something that was really interesting and sort of changed the scope of what's happening on the Missouri. They've been getting flooded out for years and years, 7 years of no crops. And the Corps of Engineers was dead set on repairing these levees. We're going to build them up. We're going to build them better. We're going to put them right back where they were, and we're going to build them stronger. And the local levee district, the farmers, said, no, we think this is, you know, we've been doing this for years. This isn't working. We need a new plan. So the local levee district, the local farmers got together with the Nature Conservancy and the Missouri Department of Conservation, and they developed a new plan to set the levees back, give the river more room to roam, protect their infrastructure, protect I-29, which was constantly being flooded out. And this was a big thing because the Corps had always been talking about building levees higher and armoring them and stuff. And here these local guys are saying, this isn't working. This is not working, and we need to do something different. So with a lot of work, because the Corps, when they say that they can only rebuild a levee in its existing location, they're really serious about it. But the Governor Parsons was involved. I think there was some involvement on the federal level to convince the Corps of Engineers to actually set back these levees. Probably the first time that's ever happened in the history of the Missouri River. So I think that's pretty cool. The other thing that's going on is these levees are being rebuilt. The local farmers are asking the Corps, they don't want the Corps to armor these levees. In fact, they're asking the Corps as they rebuild them to make the lower end of the levee at a lower elevation than the top end. And what that sort of means is these guys are starting to learn to live with the flooding. When a levee breaks at the top of the levee, the water comes shooting through there, develops big scour holes, deposits all kinds of sand on a farmer's field and stuff, basically destroying its agricultural potential for years to come. When water backs into a levee from the lower part, it kind of creeps in slowly, and then when the river goes down, it leaves. So as these levees are being reconstructed, the local farm community is starting to see ways that they can work with the river. Okay, maybe if we, maybe 7 out of 10 years, we're going to have a good crop. And then maybe those 2 or 3 years, the river's going to come up and it's going to take our crop, but we don't want it to destroy the field. So that's what's going on locally. And happy to discuss it with anyone that might have any questions or whatever. Those are just my insights from being here. I just live just a mile from the river. It's just right over the hill there, and get out on it quite frequently. And I mean, those are my insights. I think that the one thing I might say, having done these governor's flood task force, is I think this is really good news that the locals are kind of taking charge and saying, we want to do things differently. Unfortunately, I think that Missouri River flood control kind of got politicized. I mean, it's kind of like masks and vaccines and stuff, to where there was a bunch of politicians saying things. I believe a Kansas City representative introduced a bill to remove fish and wildlife from the authorized purposes of the Missouri River. But I don't think the local farm community, they're not for that. They just want to live their life and adapt to life in a changing river. I think that when the Pick-Sloan Act was authorized back in the 40s, this is a totally different river. We're getting way more rainfall than we did in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And the river is not designed to handle that much water. So we're all trying to learn to live with that fact. One of the ways to do that is levee setbacks. One of the ways to do that is to make the levees more permeable and not so the floods aren't as destructive. So I think that's good news. Hopefully maybe some of the politics is getting taken out of it, and the people that live on the river are making the decisions and not the people in Jeff City or Washington. So I'm sorry if my presentation was short and discombobulated, but that's what I got. So if anyone has any questions, I don't know, is this set up for people to ask questions and the like?
Absolutely, yes. And thank you for a great opening to kind of telling us about the state of the river and some of the past decisions that have led to current conditions. I'll just, we do have a chat. So if anybody does have questions specific to our panelists, please, you can type them in there. We can't actually have people unmute and ask questions in this format, but and we have our first question already. But Matthew wanted to say thank you for your background on the Missouri River and how the farmers are learning to deal with a changing climate. So no question to follow up there, but we'll keep our eyes open to that. So you touched a little bit about, Jim, about just the changing of our rain patterns. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Is it really central to this area, or is it kind of across the Midwest?
Well, the rain issue is kind of about the Midwest, and the issue is that the upper river and the lower river are very different. The last main stem dam on the river is at Gavin's Point, which is right above Yankton, South Dakota. Above that, they also have snowpack issues, lots of rainfall issues and stuff. But within that dam system, the Corps can control the floods, and they have been. Below Gavin's Point, it's just wide open. Any rain that hits the ground, and all these tributaries come in, the Kansas, the Platte, the Grand, they're all pouring in. So if they're getting these extreme rain events, that's all coming into the river, and there is no way to control it. The way that you control flooding at that level is with an impoundment, is with a dam. And in the modern, there is going to be no dam on the Kansas River, or there will be no dam on the Grand River. I mean, they just can't do that anymore. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, maybe they could be, but so barring that, so you can't control the amount of water that's coming into the rivers below the dam, but you can control how that water interacts with the landscape. And that's why these levee setbacks are such a good idea, to give the river room to go out into the floodplain. Here in mid-Missouri, actually in the St. Louis area as well, we have the Big Muddy National Fish and Wildlife Refuge. And it was designed just for that, to give the river room to roam. So they buy flood damaged lands and basically kind of open them up so that when the river comes up, it spreads out over these lands. The flood crests are measurably lower in areas below big muddy fish and wildlife area refuges than above them. So here in mid-Missouri, we've got some giant units on the big muddy right there where I-70 crosses the river. And the flood crests in Jeff City are significantly lower than it used to be. If the river was at 27 feet on the Boonville gauge, it would be 32 feet on the Jeff City gauge. That's not the case anymore. That's changed because when that flood passes Boonville, it spreads out. And so that's a pretty good thing. I'm reading all these questions are coming in as I'm just babbling along here.
Yes, we have, and I'm sorry, I should have kind of jumped in there, so I can help with that. I'll read the questions. So we have a question: have any farmers discussed planting different crops that are more flood tolerant, if there are such crops?
You know, I don't know. Corn and beans are still the money crops, but you know, I live right by the river in an agricultural area. Everybody here is growing sorghum, and I haven't really discussed it with the local farmers. Do you get money for that? Is that good? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know what crops would be more flood resistant, but I know corn and beans are traditionally the cash crop for Missouri row crop farmers. So that's a good question, but I don't really know the answer to it.
Sure. Okay, another question we have. Please answer the current redo of the Monarch levee in the Chesterfield Valley. So that's question one. And from the same person, we have prediction of flooding is based on rainfall predictions, which were based on old rainfall data, now not accurate. Your opinion, please.
Yes, the Monarch levee will fail. And when it does, the results will be catastrophic. And that's just the 100-year floods are coming every 4 or 5 years. So the concept of putting sort of calendar data on floods is totally old news. People don't even talk like that anymore. I mean, the scientists in this area just will not say this is a 100-year flood or a 500-year flood. You know, the Monarch levee is huge and pretty stout, but it will be overtopped at some point. And what's the name of there's a levee right above the Monarch levee adjacent to Maryland Heights. And they have a lot of issues with that. Is it the Howard's Bend levee? I don't know. They have issues with that because it actually traps flood water coming out of Creve Coeur Lake and the like. And so that levee fills up, even if the river's not high, if it rains, those fields fill up with water. And so they were talking about appropriating some of this infrastructure money and spending $18 million on a pumping system to pump that out. And we think that's a really terrible idea. We think they just need to redesign the levee system to let that storm water run off. So anyway, and answer your question about the Monarch levee, yeah, I mean, it's that old data is old. And if I was a business down there, I would be concerned. I did, incidentally, as most other people did, I drove through there in 93 and 95, and that old building there, the smokehouse, I think it was, there was water up to the ceiling, and that will happen again, without a doubt.
Well, I'll skip over to the next question because it's kind of dovetails well with this last question. So St. Louis and Kansas City are listed in the top 10 cities anticipating flooding due to extreme river events. Do you expect to see more preserves developed?
I guess I don't understand preserves. Is the questioner, maybe they can elaborate a little bit, or are we talking about doing something similar to the Big Muddy Wildlife Refuge, where like above Kansas City and above St. Louis, the river has more room to roam?
Yes, that's correct. That's
well, yes, but funding is an issue. I might be wrong on my numbers here because I'm getting them mixed up with the restoration numbers, but I think the Big Muddy Wildlife Refuge was authorized for 160,000 acres, and they're only at 60. That dovetails really well with the other numbers for the Missouri River Restoration Program, but I think that's accurate. I might be wrong. Incidentally, my just to tell you how inbred we are here in Columbia, my son-in-law married Tom Bell, the manager of the Big Muddy's daughter. So I have family ties to the Big Muddy. But yeah, I think that the Big Muddy has units close to St. Louis, and so when the big water comes up, it's able to flow into the Cora Island unit and stuff like that, and maybe prevent some tragedies from happening in St. Louis. Of course, when the Missouri floods, the Mississippi is usually in flood as well. And I don't know, St. Louis, downtown St. Louis is sort of built up on a hill. And I can't really remember in recent memory of downtown St. Louis actually being flooded, but certainly there are low-lying areas all around St. Charles County and kind of coming in there that are definitely in danger.
All right, I want to make sure we get to another question here. How will the funds be generated to purchase the property needed along the river to and even past St. Louis?
Your taxes. I don't know. That's with, of course, the Trump administration did a lot. The appropriation process for environmental type work with the Trump administrations was abysmal. Unfortunately, that hasn't changed or hasn't changed quickly. And some of the work being done with endangered species here is not being funded again this year. And all of the locals, a lot of the local people here in Columbia work for the USGS has a river studies unit. And so those guys are out in big boats on the river all the time. And some of that funding is being cut. So how is it going to be funded? That's a matter of appropriations. It has to be important. And frankly, one of my failures as a river advocate, and one of the challenges that I would like to present to myself is people don't really care about the Missouri River. It's fine. I mean, you drive over it and it looks like a river, and we have some little local places here, little music venues. You can go down and, have a sandwich and sit by the river, and it's just fine. But then the water comes up and it's not fine. But I haven't really been able to get a whole lot of kind of feedback into people just wanting a more natural river. I mean, I don't think people even realized how unnatural the river is. So that's my thing. Yeah. Maryland Heights just started to build behind the Howard. Yeah. I spoke to a state senator. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, about this Maryland Heights issue and the Howard Bend levee. That's just a mess, because I'm not an expert on how levee districts are organized, but I know basically the people that own land within the levee district contribute money to, do what needs to be done to rebuild levees or have pump systems or whatever. And the Howard's Bend levee district has been in all kinds of trouble. Everybody in the world wants to sue them. I think the Hollywood Casino has sued them. Metropolitan Sewer District has sued them. Several people have resigned. So the governance of that levee district is questionable. So I think that the push has always been to create that Howard Bend area is going to be the new Chesterfield. Is going to be the new is going to be just like the stuff behind the Monarch levee, and that's a really bad idea. I think what's down there now, I'm not from there, I don't really know, but I think there's a couple of garden places and places that are resilient to floods. You can have ball fields, you can have a nursery. There are things that are resilient to floods, but then there are things that are not. And I think the idea is to keep that from happening at the Howard Bend bottoms there. And, hopefully it doesn't happen, but it seems like every time we move ahead on that, it gets kind of pushed back.
So Jim, with this being Climate Solutions Week, and we're trying to all of the webinars this week are going to be about climate solutions and community solutions to climate change and also other pressing environmental problems. Can you speak a little bit to the work that you do with river relief? And then could you also just tell our guests how they could best support work on the river and, you know, to curb climate change in their lives?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's my work with River Relief. I was kind of the executive director for a while, and now I was on the board for a while. And right now I'm just a volunteer sort of citizen, although we do keep all of the boats and stuff up at my place here. But they're a fantastic organization, and I just love those guys so much because they work so hard. And I saw something come up about groups cleaning up the river. In the past 20 years, River Relief has done cleanups in St. Charles all the way up to Yankton, South Dakota. And you've never seen people work so hard, and tons of trash come out of the river every year because of those guys. When we first started, we were pulling all kinds of like car parts and refrigerators and old TVs out of the river. It used to be sort of a dumping ground. And after doing this for 10 years, all up and down the river, all the way from below the Gavins Point Dam to the confluence, Missouri River Relief has been working that. The big stuff is pretty much gone, sometimes other stuff. But what's not gone is things that float. Tires, plastic bottles, balls. You'd be amazed at how many just kids' balls we find. And so that work is ongoing, and it's River Relief has sort of evolved into, when we started, we'd do big community cleanups. I mean, we would have a big thing down at Frontier Park in St. Charles, and we'd get several hundred people, and we'd get them out in boats, and we'd clean up, and we'd have a barge and assemble it. And we still do those, and those are great. They get a lot done. They're good for big urban areas, particularly right downstream of the urban area, like below Kansas City. Unbelievable amount of trash. But right now there's a crew working on the river. They've been up there for 2 months. They were just a crew of like 12 that was organizing these sort of minimalist, they'd get 30 people out of Lexington, or, get some people out of Miami, Missouri. And they were out there for, I think, maybe 6 weeks. And then they took a week off to go to this big party we had last week. And now they're back at it. So they're just incredible. And so River Relief is dealing with solid waste issues on the river. And basically that means picking up trash, but not only picking up trash, is because that's kind of used as an educational tool to get people involved in other river issues. Because if you get people out in a boat and they realize how special the resource is, then all of a sudden they start to take an interest in it. Now, my work with the Missouri Coalition for the Environment is a little more on the policy side. And I think that I actually prefer being out on a boat and picking up trash. That's a much more fun thing to do than going and talking to representatives down in Jeff City and stuff. But that's the other type of work that needs to be done. Both of those go hand in hand. Not only are we involving citizens in direct action on the river, but it also involves talking to people in positions of power to help sway them. In fact, the best thing to do is to get state representatives out on the river picking up trash with a bunch of local kids, and all of a sudden, a little bell goes off in their head, like, oh, this is important. So let me do.
I do love that you kind of are saying that that's really a kind of a gateway, getting people out to the river and just doing that cleanup effort really opens the door to a lot more interest, hopefully, and action down the road that goes beyond cleaning up litter. But obviously that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of enthusiasm here for the Missouri River. And I think a lot of that is due to Missouri River Relief. We took every fourth grade kid in the Columbia School District out on the river. That was pre-COVID. Since COVID, we did some we went out and filmed a virtual river trip and stuff like that. But I thought that was amazing, because I think that was for like 4 or 5 years, every fourth grader in the school district. That was like several thousand kids. we're out on the river having a field day. So it's pretty cool.
That's amazing. Yeah. And so does River Relief do any organized events kind of closer towards St. Louis?
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
is
Absolutely. They've done many cleanups at the confluence, which is just north of North St. Louis. It's just right there. Many cleanups in the St. Charles area. And I don't know what's on their schedule. I mean, just the website is riverrelief.org, and it's a great resource. In fact, the website looks good too. I'm just so proud of that organization because, you know, we bootstrapped it up from the beginning, but it has taken off, and the people that work there are just top notch. But go to riverrelief.org. They could have something down in the St. Louis area, but every year there's something in the St. Louis area. It just may not have happened yet.
okay. Well, we are right around our time. Any closing remarks or anything that you haven't touched on yet that you'd like to close with?
Well, no, and I apologize for the informality of my presentation. Frank has been like calling me every 10 minutes, you know, but I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about this stuff. And I think it's the whole thing that the zoos put together was very interesting. And it was getting explained to me to where there are these URL codes and people can scan it with their phone and then pull up these things. So I will be around on Sunday to, I guess, kind of finish this up. I think this is being recorded and that will be played on Sunday, I suppose.
It will be. No, so we will have all of our webinars from this week that go through Thursday. They will all be up on the website so people can watch those you know, before Sunday if they didn't get a chance to watch them live. Sunday will very much be the Q&A session with the panelists from this week. So it'll be an opportunity to open up the floor and sort of have more of a discussion about climate change issues and all of the specific topics that we'll cover this week. So yeah, so thank you so much, everybody,
Absolutely.
for joining us.
I would say my final closing comment is a lot of these issues that face the river, like solid waste and trash and flooding, they all involve climate change. The amount of increased water in that system is something we are not going to get away. So flooding is a climate change issue, and it's really clear to see here as the river comes up all the time. So I think we're talking about it in the right place.
Absolutely, yeah, and you know, we're St. Louis. We are such a river city, and it will certainly impact our lives going forward. So anything we can do to mitigate those effects now will help us down the line. So thank you again to all of you for watching tonight, and a big thank you to Jim Karpowicz for the wonderful presentation he gave us about the Missouri River and challenges there. We encourage you to attend the rest of our webinars this week and join us for that live Q&A on Sunday, September 26th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. And you can register for all of the future webinars, including the Q&A on Sunday at stlzoo.org/climate change, and you'll see all of those sessions there. So thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Okay, thank you, Wanda. We'll see you.
Bye, Jim. Thank you.